The funeral director had just invited people to stand and share their memories when my brother Mike rose from his seat and adjusted his expensive suit jacket. I watched him walk toward the podium with that familiar swagger he'd perfected over years of closing high-dollar real estate deals, the same confidence he wore like armor. My 7-year-old son Tommy lay in a small white casket at the front of the room, its lid covered in superhero stickers he'd picked out himself just 2 weeks before he died, knowing exactly what was coming. Tommy had always liked being prepared. Tommy was a special boy, Mike began, his voice slipping into that polished, artificial tone of sympathy he used with clients. But sometimes God takes children early for a reason. Given our family's history of struggles, the broken homes, the poor choices, maybe this is God's way of ending bad bloodlines. The words hit me like ice water poured straight down my spine. I felt my father, Dennis, beside me, gripping the wooden pew so hard, his knuckles turned white. But somehow the worst part wasn't Mike speaking. It was the response. I watched several relatives nod slowly, thoughtfully, as if he'd said something wise instead of cruel. My cousin Janet leaned toward her husband and whispered, "He has a point." My Aunt Ruth dabbed her eyes and patted Mike's shoulder when he returned to his seat, like he'd just delivered profound wisdom, instead of calling my dead child a genetic mistake. Before I could even process what had happened, my sister Vera stood up. She smoothed her black designer dress, the kind she'd probably bought specifically for this occasion, and walked to the front with her chin held high. "What Mike said might sound harsh," she began, "but there's truth in it. Some kids are better off not growing up in broken homes." She paused, letting the words sink in. Tommy suffered so much, not just from the cancer, but from the circumstances. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise for Nadine, too. Now she can start fresh, find a husband, have a proper family this time. A proper family. As if Tommy and I weren't one. As if my son's 2-year battle with leukemia meant less because his father had walked out when Tommy was 2. The funeral director shifted uncomfortably near the side door, clearly wanting to intervene, but unsure how. That was when I heard a small voice from the third row. "Should I tell everyone what Uncle Mike did to Tommy before he died?" Every head in the funeral home turned. Colin, Tommy's 8-year-old best friend, stood there in a borrowed black suit, his hands shaking, but his voice steady. This tiny boy with freckles across his nose and a missing front tooth had more courage than any adult in the room. Mike's face drained of color. "What's the kid talking about?" He forced out a laugh that fooled no one. "Kids make up stories when they're upset. He's confused." "I'm not confused," Colin said, stepping into the aisle as his mother reached for him. "Tommy made me promise. He said if something bad happened to him, I had to tell the truth about Uncle Mike. He said nobody would believe him because he was just a kid, but maybe they'd believe me at his funeral." The room fell completely silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner, a phone vibrating inside a purse, the faint flap of the American flag outside. My mother, Gloria, jumped to her feet, her face flushed. "This is inappropriate. Michael visited his nephew out of love. This child is traumatized and making things up." Colin reached into his pocket and pulled out an old iPhone. "Tommy told me to record it," he said. "Uncle Mike came to the hospital when Mrs. Nadine wasn't there. He told the nurses he was taking Tommy to the playground, but they never went." "Where did they go?" I asked, my voice sounding distant, unfamiliar. "To Uncle Mike's car," Colin said. "He locked the doors and said mean things. He told Tommy that his mom was a bad mom, and that's why God gave him cancer. He said if Tommy really loved her, he should stop fighting and die so she could use the life insurance money and start over with a better kid." The funeral home erupted in gasps and movement, but Colin stood there trembling, holding that phone like a shield, ready to shatter everything we thought we knew. That morning had started like every morning since Tommy died 5 days earlier. I woke at 3 a.m. in his bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and the faint smell of his watermelon shampoo. The house felt wrong without the oxygen machine, without the soft beeping of medication alarms, without his small voice asking me to lie with him. I showered, stared at the black dress hanging untouched on the bathroom door, and wondered what a mother is supposed to wear to bury her child. Downstairs, Dennis had already made coffee. He'd been sleeping on our couch for weeks, never complaining. He looked older than his 60 years, bent under grief that mirrored mine. "Everything's ready," he said quietly. "Is Mike coming?" I asked, though I already knew. "Your mother says the whole family will be there," Dennis replied, his jaw tightening. And even then, standing in that quiet kitchen, I had no idea that within hours, our family would never be the same again. I knew exactly how my mother was when Mike was involved. He had always been the golden child. First son, Harvard graduate, successful real estate mogul with a trophy wife and a house featured in architectural magazines. In Gloria's eyes, he could do no wrong. Even when he told me that Tommy's cancer was probably caused by my irresponsible lifestyle as a single mother, she defended him, saying he was only worried about the family's reputation. Vera wasn't any better. She and her husband had been trying to have children for 8 years, pouring money into fertility treatments that never worked. When I got pregnant with Tommy, at 25, unmarried, and still in graduate school, something in her hardened toward me. Every family gathering turned tense. "Must be nice," she'd say, watching Tommy play, getting pregnant so easily when you weren't even trying. The doorbell rang at 8. Colin stood on the porch with his mother, Patricia. Both were dressed somberly. Colin clutched a Batman action figure, one he and Tommy had traded back and forth since kindergarten. They'd bonded instantly over superheroes and dinosaurs. Even when Tommy missed months of school, Colin visited every weekend, bringing homework and stories from class. "I brought this for Tommy," Colin said. "We had a deal. Whoever had Batman got to make a wish. It's Tommy's turn." Patricia hugged me gently. "Colin has something he needs to tell you, but he insists it wait until the service. He says Tommy made him promise." I knelt in front of Colin. His eyes were red-rimmed but fierce. "Whatever Tommy asked you to do, sweetheart, you don't have to if it's too hard." "I promised," he said simply. Last promises matter. The funeral home parking lot was already full when we arrived. Mike's BMW sat near the entrance, Gloria and Vera's cars nearby. Then the others, Tommy's teachers, nurses from oncology, parents of children we'd met during treatment, Dennis's friends from his veterans group who'd adopted Tommy as an honorary grandson. Mr. Morrison met us at the door. "Tommy looks peaceful," he said softly. "The superhero pins are on his lapel, just like you asked." I walked into that room of flowers and sympathy cards, not knowing an 8-year-old would soon expose the darkness hiding behind family loyalty and expensive suits. The service began beautifully. Pastor Williams spoke about Tommy's courage, how he wore his Superman cape to chemo to encourage younger kids. He told the story of Tommy donating his entire piggy bank, $43.17, to buy toys for children with no visitors. I felt a moment of peace, knowing my son's kindness was being honored. Then came the open eulogy. Mike stood first, straightening his $1,000 suit. "Sometimes God takes children early for a reason," he said again, repeating the poison. "Maybe this is God's way of ending bad bloodlines." I heard gasps. Mrs. Henderson, who tutored Tommy for free, nearly stood up to leave. But my relatives nodded. Uncle Carl even said, "Amen." Gloria squeezed Mike's hand. "So brave of you," she whispered. Before I could speak, Vera took the podium. She talked about broken homes, burdens, financial stress, and proper families. She looked at me with something between pity and contempt. "Maybe this is a blessing in disguise," she said. My hands shook violently. Dennis began to rise, but Gloria pulled him down. "Let people speak their truth," she hissed. That was when Colin stood up. "Should I tell everyone what Uncle Mike did to Tommy before he died?" The room froze. Mike laughed nervously. "Children make up stories." "I'm not confused," Colin said, stepping forward. "Tommy made me promise." Gloria snapped that this was inappropriate. But Colin didn't stop. He talked about the hospital visits, the timing, the lies to nurses, the locked car. "Where did they go?" I asked. "To Uncle Mike's car," Colin said. "He said mean things. He told Tommy God gave him cancer because his mom was bad. He said Tommy should stop fighting so she could start over with a better kid." People gasped. Parents pulled children away. Business associates edged toward exits. "He's lying," Mike said, his voice cracking. Colin lifted the phone. "Tommy asked me to record you." "Play it," I said. Gloria tried to stop him. "This is a funeral." "My baby is dead," I shouted. "Play it." Tommy's labored breathing filled the room. Then Mike's voice, cold and clear, talking about debt, foreclosure, and letting go. He told Tommy his father was smart for leaving, that his mother should have given him up. I walked toward Mike, every step shaking. "You tortured my dying son." "I was being realistic," he said. "There's more," Colin said, swiping to another recording. This one was worse. Mike talked about humiliation, welfare, and insurance money. He told Tommy to stop taking his medicine, to let go. When it ended, I lunged forward and slapped Mike hard enough to echo through the room. "You told my baby to die," I screamed. "You assaulted me," he shouted. Dennis stepped forward, his voice breaking with fury. "You knew," he said to Gloria. "You let this happen." The truth shattered what remained of our family. Vera tried to step in, her voice sharp with forced reason. "Dad, that's not fair. We all knew the situation was hopeless. Mike was just trying to spare everyone more pain." "By telling a 7-year-old he was a burden?" Patricia shot back, her voice trembling with rage. It was the first time she'd spoken, and when she did, the room finally seemed to understand the depth of what had been revealed. By telling a dying child his own mother would be better off without him? The funeral director, Mr. Morrison, stepped forward at last, his hands raised. "I'm going to have to ask everyone to calm down or leave. This is still a funeral service." "Yes," Dennis said firmly, stepping in front of me like a shield. "It is my grandson's funeral, and anyone who believes his death was a blessing, anyone who nodded along while my son called him a mistake, anyone who thinks a sick child is better off dead than loved, get out, now." The room erupted into movement. Chairs scraped against the floor. Mike stormed toward the exit, his face twisted with fury, shouting about lawsuits and defamation. Gloria and Vera followed him, along with more than a dozen relatives who wouldn't meet my eyes as they left. Mike shouted over his shoulder about destroying my life, about making sure I never recovered. Colin walked quietly to Tommy's casket. He opened it just enough to place the Batman figure beside Tommy's small hands. "I kept my promise," he whispered. "The bad man can't hurt anyone else now." When the doors finally closed behind them, the room felt strangely peaceful. Only about 30 people remained, but they were the ones who had truly loved Tommy. His nurse Sandra stood and shared how he used to sneak candy to other kids on the ward. Mrs. Henderson read a short story Tommy had written about a superhero whose power was making sick kids laugh. Patricia invited everyone to her home afterward to share real memories, not poisoned words. That night, I sat alone in Tommy's room, numb. Dennis knocked softly and came in carrying a cardboard box. "I need to show you something," he said. Inside were recordings. He'd installed a small camera in Tommy's hospital room months earlier, suspecting something was wrong. I watched Mike tell my child God didn't love him. I ran to the bathroom and vomited. "I was building a case," Dennis said through tears. "I thought we had time. We didn't." Within days, lawyers were involved. The recordings led to criminal charges, child abuse, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The story exploded across the news. Mike lost his license. His wife divorced him. Gloria and Vera stood by him and cut us off completely. Dennis divorced Gloria after 40 years, saying he couldn't live with someone who excused the torture of a child. From that darkness came light. The hospital created the Tommy Protocol, restricting unsupervised visits for vulnerable children. Colin's family became my family. 6 months later, while packing Tommy's things, I found a letter hidden in his Captain America book. He wrote about love, bravery, and truth. He wrote that Uncle Mike was wrong, that I loved him perfectly, that Colin should keep Batman. The letter broke me and healed me all at once. The funeral, meant to bury my son, ended up burying lies that had lived in our family for decades. Tommy's small voice changed policies, protected other children, and taught me that family isn't blood, it's love, courage, and who shows up when it matters most. Tommy taught me that family isn't about blood or DNA or shared last names. It's about who shows up with love instead of judgment, who brings comfort instead of cruelty, who fights beside you instead of against you. The funeral that was meant to bury my son ended up burying the lies our family had lived with for decades, lies wrapped in respectability, success, and tradition. If you've made it this far in our story, you probably understand something painful but important. Sometimes the most toxic people in our lives share our DNA. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones who do the most harm. And peace doesn't come from keeping quiet. It comes from telling the truth, even when that truth shatters everything you thought you knew. Tommy's bravery in documenting what his uncle did saved other children from similar abuse. His story changed hospital policies. It forced hard conversations about family abuse that people are usually too afraid to have. And it proved that even the smallest voices can carry the greatest power. Please share this story with anyone who needs to hear that it's okay to cut toxic family members out of your life. That protecting your children is more important than keeping the peace. That love is not proven through silence, but through action. Comment below if you've ever had to make a difficult choice to protect yourself or your child from someone who was family. Your story might help someone else find the courage to do the same. And please subscribe to this channel, where we share real stories of survival, hope, and the courage to stand up against those who would harm the innocent, even when those people are supposed to love and protect us. Tommy's legacy lives on, in every child protected by the Tommy Protocol, in every parent who finds the strength to say no more, and in the truth that even a 7-year-old boy can change the world by refusing to let evil win.